Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into a pretty stark warning about the future of your money. And look, this isn't just some random opinion. This is a result of a 6-month investigation by Speaker Sandeep Maheshwari, and he believes the very ground beneath our financial world is about to give way.
So let's just get right to the heart of it with his core prediction. And honestly, it's a shocker. He's saying that millions of people who feel totally financially secure, people with a good chunk of savings, maybe $1 million, maybe even more, are unknowingly on a collision course with poverty. And the wildest part? He says they won't even see it coming.
Now, he makes it clear this isn't some casual guess. This whole thing came from a deep dive that he says completely flipped his own understanding of what money, safety, and security even mean. What he believes he's found is a huge global trend that most of us are just completely missing.
Okay, so how in the world do you even begin to wrap your head around a prediction that big? Well, according to the source material, the answer isn't in trying to predict the future. It's actually in looking back. We have to go back to square one and ask a really simple question. What even is money? Turns out the answer is buried in its long and mostly forgotten history.
This takes us to the history of money, which, when you peel it all back, is really the story of empires rising and, more importantly, falling. And this isn't just a history lesson for the sake of it. The argument is that this history holds the exact key to understanding where we are right now and the potential crisis that's looming.
And you can see a really clear pattern here, right? We started off with stuff that had real, tangible value, trading goods for goods and then using precious metals like gold and silver. But over time, things got, more abstract. We went from using paper as a simple receipt for gold to our system today, where money is basically just an idea backed by trust.
And this right here, this distinction is absolutely crucial to the entire argument. For centuries, gold and silver were the money. They had value all on their own. The paper notes people carried around, that was just a currency. Think of it like a convenient claim check that you could take to the bank in exchange for the real money anytime you wanted.
This reveals a cycle that has happened over and over again throughout history. It's almost like a playbook. An empire needs cash, usually for a war or something, so it starts secretly mixing cheaper metals into its coins. Eventually, the public catches on, they lose faith, and they start hoarding the good stuff, the pure silver coins. And just like that, the debased currency collapses into worthlessness. All right, so that brings us to a massive turning point in modern history. A single decision that completely changed the game, altering the very nature of money for the entire world. And, according to this research, setting us on the exact same path as all those empires that came before.
Everything changed in 1971. In a move that sent shockwaves around the globe, U.S. President Nixon got on TV and announced that the U.S. would no longer exchange its dollars for gold. And with that one decision, the last official link between the world's currency and actual physical money was severed. Just gone.
And that single act plunged the entire world into the system we have today, the era of fiat currency. The word fiat actually comes from Latin, meaning let it be done. So it's money that has value simply because a government says it does. Its entire worth is based on one thing and one thing only: trust. Let's be blunt about what this means. This was, in effect, a global default. That promise that your paper notes were a claim on real money was officially broken. As the source puts it, imagine your bank giving you all the checkbooks you could ever want, but then telling you that you can never actually withdraw your cash. The checkbooks are the currency, the cash was the money. So what happens when you live in a world like this? A world of fiat money, based purely on trust, where new currency can just be created out of thin air. What does that actually mean for the savings you've worked your entire life to build?
This is where we need to shift our perspective. We're all taught that inflation is when prices go up. But the source material argues that's like confusing the symptom with the disease. The original definition of inflation isn't rising prices. It's the increase in the money supply itself. The rising prices we see everywhere, that's just the inevitable side effect.
So why does that distinction matter so much? Because a fiat system allows governments to pay for their spending not just with the taxes you see on your paycheck, but by simply creating more currency. And every single new dollar or rupee they create devalues all the dollars and rupees you've already saved. It is, for all intents and purposes, a hidden tax that eats away at your wealth without you even noticing.
Yeah, think of it this way. The number you see in your bank account might be going up, but its actual power to buy things, real things like food, gas, a house, is constantly going down. Your savings are basically melting like an ice cube on a hot summer day.
So where does all this new currency actually go? Well, it doesn't just spread out evenly. It tends to flood into financial assets first. It pumps up massive, dangerous bubbles in things like the stock market and real estate, creating this destructive cycle of huge booms followed by absolutely devastating busts.
And this is really the core of the warning. The dot-com crash in 2000, that was a tech stock bubble. The 2008 crisis, that was a housing bubble. In both of those cases, people ran to what they thought was safe, the US dollar. But the source poses a chilling question. What happens when the bubbles in stocks, housing, and the dollar itself are all threatening to pop at the same time?
A huge reason for this risk is the absolutely mind-boggling level of government debt, especially in the US, which issues the world's main currency. This mountain of debt really only leaves two terrible options: either default on it, which would be a global catastrophe, or print even more money to pay for it, which basically guarantees runaway inflation.
The source material uses this really powerful analogy that just cuts through all the typical financial advice we hear. We're always told to diversify, buy mutual funds, think long term. But if the entire system is what's at risk, that's like bringing an umbrella to protect yourself from a tsunami. The tool just isn't built for the scale of the problem.
So this all leads to the main takeaway, and it's not what you might expect. The speaker isn't offering some hot stock tip or a secret investment. The call to action is way more fundamental. It's a plea to empower yourself with knowledge, to stop blindly trusting the experts, and to do your own research, to actually study the history of money for yourself.
Because in the end, history is crystal clear on this. Every single fiat currency in the history of the world has eventually failed. Every single one. They either collapse into worthlessness or are replaced entirely. The research presented here concludes that our current system won't be any different. Which leaves us all with one final, pretty uncomfortable question. Knowing that the end of this system is a historical certainty, are you prepared?